So today we're going to talk about Healthcare.gov, a U.S. government initiative to allow its citizens to sign up for health insurance through a centralized website. Quick blurb about us. My name is Daniel.
I'm Sophia.
And I'm Ash.
So today we're going to have a quick overview of what Healthcare.gov is about. And then we're going to go over some key lessons learned. And then we'll summarize those lessons learned in takeaways. And finally, we'll have 10 minutes at the end for questions.
Have you heard about the new Healthcare.gov? That's where you'll discover the new health insurance market. The marketplace is the place to go to find affordable health coverage and to see if you qualify for lower costs on things like your monthly premiums. At Healthcare.gov, there's also information, tools, and checklists to help you get ready to find health insurance at the marketplace, starting October 1st. Learn more about the health insurance marketplace today at Healthcare.gov.
So this is just a quick ad for the website. Unfortunately, the reality of the project ended up being quite a bit different from this, but we'll talk about that.
So we just go over a quick timeline of the project. So this whole thing started in March 2010 when Obama signed the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. So by December 2012, there was enough information gathered. They started building this website, and with a project finish date of October 2013. And by March, there's already problems, and also in June and in August, key government agencies who are responsible for the website, they all expressed concern that the website will not be ready by the launch date in October. And in October 2013, the website was finally launched with a lot of difficulties and a lot of controversies.
The first lesson is that the scope requirements must be reviewed by priority stakeholders and managed on a timely basis. Now, the Affordable Care Act introduced major changes to the US healthcare system, along with considerable controversies. Individual states were given the option to either join the proposed federal marketplace or create their own, which resulted in further complications. The Health and Human Services moved swiftly because they could not afford to wait until all the details were finalized, which affected the scope and success measures for the project. The disorganized project planning and defining phases made the back-end development extremely difficult as the scope and requirements kept changing. And the time available for development, testing, and implementation shrank from 16 months to 7 months. And so it was an unrealistic expectation to achieve full scope on time without compromising on quality. So the best practice is to complete requirements by analyzing stakeholder expectations at project initiation and ensuring that scope requirements are reviewed, controlled, and monitored on a timely basis. The second lesson is that, well, Obama said himself, the procurement mindset in the federal government is cumbersome, complicated, and outdated. They treat technology systems as a final product rather than a system of services that are iterative in nature, that have to roll out in phases and be continuously tailored. The procurement process should consider expert opinion to gather deep insights in the technical area, especially with projects such as the Healthcare Government website. During the tendering process, CMS limited the number of acceptable proposals, rushed to select familiar contractors without receiving competitive bids. And a no-bid contract was awarded a few times, which interfered in terms of competitive price, quality, and merit. And the no-bid contract functioned poorly and did not accompany many of the key technical requirements, which is very dire to such a complex project. And after the failure of the initial launch, a group of Silicon Valley developers were brought on board to actually fix the website. So moving forward, the tendering process must allow for competitive bidding, transparency, and fairness to ensure that contracts are awarded based on merit. So the third lesson is that the contracting plan must support the procurement process approach, conducive to the project work, with appropriate performance incentives for the contractors. So CMS picked contract types that put the risk solely on the government rather than providing performance-based incentives to their contractors. CGI Group secured the key contract that's certified in indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract. And due to the cost reimbursable structure, such as the IDIQ, it's more effective to acquire resources, but more difficult to achieve results without tremendous oversight. And so cost reimbursable contracts usually have a poorly defined scope, baseline with vague requirements. And so the issue is that the contracting plan needs to include acquisition strategies that consider the whole life cycle of the product. And it's important that contract actions are properly documented and that a leader is assigned to work as a systems integrator on large, complex IT projects. And furthermore, CMS ought to have used better acquisition planning and contracting approaches by performing relevant research and past performance reviews to ensure that quality standards are met when awarding key contracts.
Our next lesson here is that an effective change management plan can help control the scope creep. So with the project, there's many stakeholders involved. At the very top, there was President Obama, who, of course, this project was his baby. And then there are several major government agencies underneath him, and there's also 60 different subcontractors under those departments. Finally, a big stakeholder was the 44 different states that would be using this website, and they all had their input throughout the project. Because of all the different input, the project management team was oftentimes very confused about what to do next. And they did not have an effective change management plan in place to control their scope. So the scope kept evolving and evolving. And this resulted in significant cost overruns and delays to the project. For example, with an initial budget of $300 million, they ended up paying $1.7 billion. And with the delay, they delayed 3 months after the planned launch date. The next lesson is that iterative and incremental releases help to reduce risk and improve the project's quality. So with the software projects like this, where it's highly complex and also has an uncertain scope, Agile has significant benefits. It's both iterative and incremental. So iterative means that they can break the development cycle into multiple stages and also release incrementally, building on the previous development cycles. And in this way, they can take a very large, complex project, divide it into multiple sub-projects, and thereby reducing the risk and also increasing the quality, because lessons learned from previous development cycles can be rolled over into new development cycles. And this played a key role in the project's recovery, because at the end, they brought in numerous Silicon Valley engineers to work on the project to bring it back into recovery, and they noted that the key reason they succeeded is because they used Agile. Technical requirements should be clearly defined and communicated to contractors on a regular basis. Because these requirements for the project were changing continuously because of all the different input, they did not communicate to their contractors enough. And some contractors, for example, thought the project only needed to have 800,000 users per month accessing it, but in reality, it would actually need to support 2 million because of more states signing on and higher than expected demand. And the contractors did not know this, so this created a lot of technical issues down the road. And finally, all these technical issues were the most noticeable source of failure, so really this point should be highlighted more.
So lesson number 7 is how risk analysis should be done, and it should be both comprehensive and have contingency plan made to deal with the top threats. So one of the top threats is the political nature of this project. So it's controversial with both the Democrats and the Republicans. So the Democrats wanted something more similar to the system in Canada, and the Republicans, they don't want the act at all. So because of that, and also during the next House election in 2010, there was a Republican majority. So there's a lot of political pressure to stop the project throughout the project cycle. So with that, and also a lot of the problem with the scope, if we look at the budget, so the initial planned budget was around $100 million. So then they later revised it to around $300 million. And the final cost is actually $1.7 billion, which is a lot higher than initially expected. So this highlights a problem that they did not anticipate the high risk with the budget and schedule overruns. Their choice of project to the agile method was good with, for certain things, but it's not really good with managing budget. And there wasn't actually enough training with how to use the tools they selected to fully realize its potential. And lastly, what they also failed to do is to have an effective communication plan when it comes to communicate with one of the major stakeholders, which is the public. So imagine if you're trying to sign up for health insurance for your family, and you watch all the amazing commercials like the ones we showed to you in the beginning, and only to be greeted with this page, the system is down at the moment when you try to sign up for health insurance. Obviously, you'll be very disappointed, and as you're expecting something like this page where it's open. So that's one of the main issue, is that people were expecting something to be there when in fact it isn't.
All right, so today we offered an opportunity to reflect on the human errors, organizational flaws, and best practices for solution delivery in large IT projects, such as the Healthcare government website. The site received over 4 million visitors on the day it was launched, but only 6 people successfully enrolled. And the site was shortly taken down right after. So in terms of lessons learned from its project management, we've identified 6 takeaways. The first takeaway is the gap in leadership. A clear leadership must be established, and a lead project manager and integrator role was beyond the capability of CMS. Secondly, other key members apart from CMS had more influence and power that delayed important decisions and increased the scope. So clear articulation of sequential requirements and success metrics is salient to establish a project initiation. Thirdly, CMS did not prepare a written procurement strategy to describe the overall procurement process in terms of documenting the factors, assumptions, risks, and trade-offs that would guide the project decision. The fourth takeaway is that there were regulatory delays that probably was attributed to the gridlock politics. And there were also risks in terms of marketplace technology and project governance, and this should have been accounted for with proper risk planning and analysis. The fifth takeaway is that no one had visibility on all the critical milestones that each different group had to reach in order to complete the project successfully, which is very concerning because milestones are critical to change control, and change control process is inevitable. So the final takeaway is that true agile methodology and continuous testing and integration should be used for full end-to-end testing of the technology, and to ensure that there are real deliverable artifacts. So we believe that these are the valuable lessons that must be observed, reflected upon, and made accessible to all large IT projects as well as federal government teams. And with that, thank you.
Okay, the timing was absolutely perfect, almost a second. Okay, so now we'll take some questions and answers from the audience, and our panel first one at the back.
Good morning. Great presentation. I just would like to know what are some of the lessons that you have learned about project management and how that is going to affect the way that you approach projects yourself in the future.
Hi, thanks for the question. This project has been really relevant to me personally because in my workplace, I'm currently leading a large software project and over a 3-year time span. And this has taught me that stakeholders are really important to engage early in the project, and that their comments and suggestions need to be taken down and controlled and communicated back to them saying, if you want this change, sure, it can be done, but this is the impact on the scope and budget. So just clear, continuous communication is really important.
So personally, prior to my master's, I worked at the utility side, and I think one main takeaway is that the communication to stakeholders is very important. So we had projects where we have customers who weren't really satisfied because they didn't know a lot about the progress, about the project that we're running. So for me, it's more of updating the main stakeholder, which is the customers, of what we're doing, and so they have a better idea of the progress of the project, so they will not be disappointed.
And just to add on to some of the previous comments from personal experience leading a software, software project, I had to develop KPI dashboards recently for my company. And one thing I learned was that there will be lots of pilot phases. It's a very iterative process, so communication is key. Ensuring that sort of verifying that the requirements are still valid is also very important. And just keeping that like an open line of open loop of communication going is just a critical key to the whole thing.
Excellent. Next question. Just throw up your hand. Sure, here at the front, one of our other judges.
Yeah, great job. My question is, if you were thrown into this project halfway, knowing the issues that you talked about today, what was the first thing that you would do to get back on track, or even possibly decide to cancel the project or bring that forward as a item with the sponsor? So basically, what's the first thing that you would do if you were thrown in halfway through the project?
So if I am throwing halfway the project and I have, I guess, major input, first of all, I would want to delay the project so that we have time to sort out all the problems that's occurring. That's the problems that we've already identified during our presentation. Because to me, again, customer satisfaction is one of the major thing that is one of the most important things. And therefore, we want to make sure the product we release is what we promise to do. And even if it's at the cost of a schedule overrun or some of the budget, but we want to make sure the what we release actually works. So again, to reiterate what I said, is just to delay the project until we can sort out all the problems.
To add on further, I think that bringing all the stakeholders together, the key ones together, and getting their feedback on how the project's been going so far, what are their concerns up to this point, how can we address those concerns with perhaps adjusting the timeline, the budget scope, and making sure that they're the ones, you're giving them input to the project before you make any key decisions.
This might be a quickie and you might not have an answer, but you said that the final cost of this program is $1.7 billion, and it's a potential that if that number had been floated out at the beginning as the true real cost of something like this, do you
Great question. I think that there's an unrealistic expectation for a lot of software projects out there, which is why they have such a high failure rate, where the stakeholders are saying, we expected it to cost 100 million, and usually ends up being 5 to 10 times more. The expectation, I think, needs to be coming from previous projects where to use as a baseline to estimate for new projects. And I think if the communication with the stakeholders is clear enough, then they can make an informed decision about what to do with that kind of estimate. With the $1.7 billion estimate, I think because the act was already approved and there was huge political pressure to move forward on this item, I think that the budget would have been approved, albeit with some other considerations.
This is more a comment than a question, and it's the soapbox that I'm on quite often about this terminology of software projects. The other part of it is, in defense, software is a tool, but it's often not treated that way in the project management community. We focus so much on the software. And earlier on, you did comment on the political pressures. This whole thing is political. That's the project. And in my mind, it is a huge cultural shift. And they are so far behind Canada and the rest of the Western countries in terms of their universal healthcare. And that is the main challenge. It's unfortunate that what the customers see, the citizens that will log into this, to them it's the tool that will give them the healthcare that they want. And it's unfortunate that they have these difficulties because it just taints everything else.
Thank you. Next question. We have time for, this is probably the last question.
Regarding the lessons learned, could you comment on, it took you some short while to put all this package together with lessons learned. Can you contrast with that with how the actual team learned their lessons? Contrast your team learning their lessons to the actual team learning the lessons. Did they learn any of the lessons early on? Did they implement any of the lessons?
Oh, okay. I think they did at the end, right?
But how do we contrast that?
So just a clarification, right? So I think how the project team for government for the Healthcare.gov, they eventually learn the lesson at the end when they finally successfully launch the website again. As for your question about us, you mean as our team as a group of how we handle this sort of like a project on the project management side? Is that?
I was thinking more of their lessons.
How we
and
apply them.
your understanding of their lessons.
Okay. I think it gave us a good opportunity to understand that communication and milestones were really important. Even though we say that software projects are iterative in nature, I think communication is really iterative in nature. And so making sure that we have shared responsibility and ensuring that we all understand each other's milestones and together can achieve our project milestones, ensured that we worked effectively.
Excellent. I'd like a round of applause for this team.